we are very happy to have you on board with us. And my name is Lina Vasilute. I'm research fellow at CEPS, and we are delighted today to co-organize this discussion together with the Central Council of German Sinti and Roma. We are also partners in the CHACHIPEN project. And CHACHIPEN means in Romani language truth. And the project itself that is funded by European Commission DG Justice, Rights, Equality and Citizenship Program, it stands for paving the way for truth and reconciliation processes to address historically rooted anti-Gypsyism in Europe. And the project calls for recognition of anti-Gypsyism, remembrance of atrocities that were perpetrated against Romani people around Europe, justice, and calls for further trust building. And in light of this project, we have raised a goal to investigate and to look closer into some interesting or promising practices. And we have identified that two expert commissions that have been set up in Sweden and Germany are very interesting examples on how this historical injustice and structural anti-Gypsyism that has been perpetrated for centuries actually could be potentially addressed. And today, we are very happy that Guillermo and the colleagues in Central Council called to hold this event is precisely looking at what German Commission has done. So I'm giving a handover for Guillermo, and before that, I would like also to thank to CEPS colleagues who have been very supportive in preparation for this for this event. So Miriam Mir and Xavier Hadidi, who are helping out us today. So Guillermo, please introduce today's topic and lead us through our excellent panel.
Many thanks, Lina. I am Guillermo Ruiz, political advisor of the Central Council of German Sinti and Roma. And today we are going to devote this discussion to address the working outputs of the German Independent Commission Anti-Gypsyism. This commission was set up over 2 years ago. It worked 2 years and delivered its 800 pages report on addressing different various forms of expression of anti-Gypsyism in the society in Germany. After Sweden, Germany is the second European country starting a process of a new appraisal of the historical dimension of anti-Gypsyism in the society and the state. Here I have to stress that this independent commission that was set up by the German government and funded by it wouldn't have existed without a very intensive and hard advocacy work of the of the civil society of German Sinti and Roma, especially of the Central Council of German Sinti and Roma. Today we want to learn more for this German experience, and also to discuss whether this German experience should or can be transposed to other European countries, and under what conditions should happen if this happens. Today we're honored to have four distinguished speakers and discussants. Our first speaker will be Markus Enz. He was member of the Independent Commission Anti-Gypsyism. He is researcher at the Technical University in the Department for Research of Anti-Semitism. Our second speaker will be Silas Kropf. He was as well member of the Independent Commission, and she's an independent consultant, and he will tell us about the perspective as well from the community. Then we have two discussants. The first one is Marcela Dabova from the DG Justice, from the European Commission, and the second one representing the European Civil Society, Anna Rozanova representing the European Roma grassroots organizations, ERGO. After this short introduction, I would like to give the floor to Marcus.
Thanks, Guillermo. Thanks for inviting me. I hope everyone can hear me well. I want to give an overall overview over the commission, the work, and how it came together. My first point would be that this has been a long process. It is not that it suddenly happened, but it was lobbied for by the Central Council, and I think also by other organizations, mainly the Central Council, for more than a decade. And that's something important to know and to keep in mind. For me, one word of the title is the change in perspective. And the change in perspective for me would mean that the government, the majority society itself, would come up with the idea that there's a problem and that they should do something about it. So we have another classical example where civil society pushed the government to set up such a commission. But I would say in the end, how they did it was quite okay. They gathered some scholars, also some who are activists, among them 3 with minority background. And I would say, at least, for example, there was no one in the commission, I would say, who was a failure or something. I mean, it could have been quite well that they put on some ethnologist who's doing like research, right? So this didn't happen. So the commission could work quite well. And in most of the questions, we were like agreeing on a broad variety, of course, not in every detail, but we had a common understanding of racism and anti-Gypsyism. So we could work for 2 years. We had considerable funding that allowed us to commission other studies, small and big ones. And that was something that's really important. Of course, all of us have been some kind of experts in our fields, but there's a lot of topics where we were no experts and where no studies existed. So we were able to fill those gaps partially. And that was very helpful, I think, for the general research, but also for the political situation. And then in March 2021, we came up with that report. It can be downloaded in German. It's thick, as you mentioned. Until now, we haven't been able, due to time and financial restrictions, but mainly time, to commission an English translation, but I still think that would be something very important. Guillermo, or I don't know who, but we should work on this. I think the main findings are difficult to tell, because I mean it's a report about everything, right? So we had a lot of discussions ourselves. We had those studies we commissioned. We had a lot of hearings with 4 or 5 organizations that are considered to work like German-wide of Sinti or Romani people. We had a big hearing where we invited all of the organizations we knew and asked them about their needs and their wishes for this report. So we came up with those 3 words: the change in perspective. Change in perspective for me means that it has to be understood that this is not a problem caused by Roma, but a problem deeply rooted in majority society. I mean, I repeat this for 10 years now, but still in political discussions, when you talk about it, it's mainly about how Roma people here and there suffer and so on, but it's not addressed that this is a structural problem in the society. And very often people think that when there are no Roma or Sinti present, that there's no problem, but they don't understand that it can still continue to exist. So to understand and to accept that this is a major problem in the society's institutions would be this change in perspective that is very much needed. The second would be historical justice. We were surprised how important the continuing effects of National Socialist persecution are still for today's families in Germany. And we think, or we expect, that this is the case for families in other European countries as well. Nearly all interview partners, all studies show that the effects that this persecution had, that this fundamental taking away of money, of goods, of livelihoods had, and the ongoing discrimination afterwards, that this is still felt today. This is also where one of our major recommendations is focused on. It is that the persecution needs to be accepted as a complete persecution of all minority members from 1933 until 1945, whereas until now it's still that every single person has to prove that they were persecuted, and that they also have to remedy the effects of the discrimination in the recompensation processes, so that the people who are the children, grandchildren of the survivors or of the people that were killed, that their discrimination in the recompensation process is compensated, because this had enormous effects on every aspect of their social life. And the third aspect we identified was participation. We need a much deeper understanding of participation, of inclusion in political decisions, of support for the organizations, especially as we see nothing goes without the organizations. I hope I have 2 or 3 more minutes. What I think the 2 most important studies we asked for, they were about the perspectives of the people who suffer from this racism. And this is, we would say, the first time that this is systematically asked for in Germany with qualitative interviews. So it's not about only numbers and say yes or no, but it's really like interview situations. And this could really show on a very broad level how this persecution works, how the discrimination works, and how it is perceived by the ones who are discriminated against. So this is something that we think is one of our most important studies that we commissioned. And the other is about institutional anti-Gypsyism. And this is something we also consider to be extremely important and to be completely underreported in Germany, but also Europe-wide. In Germany, institutional racism isn't even accepted as a concept in many political fields. So it's really, if you tell someone that there's institutional racism in the police, they would tell you that this is a general suspicion against the police and we are not racist and so on. So they don't even have the understanding of what institutional racism could look like. And this is something we have to focus much more, because this puts on the effects on the minority people in the broad field. I will tell about the major recommendations in the discussion. Another one is focused on refugees. Mainly we say, do not deport Romani refugees. The other is about participation, that there's much more efforts needed. And the maybe most relevant for CHACHIPEN considers truth and reconciliation commissions, where we say we need truth and reconciliation, but not for National Socialism, but for the discrimination in the German democratic society after 1945. And we think that the structural racism that happened there on all levels cannot just be remedied like this, but it has to really be worked through a commission that works on a federal level, but also on regional levels. So those were the recommendations that consider like content, and the last combined recommendation is more of an organizational kind, that we say we need one advisor on the highest governmental level who is only task is to organize the fight against anti-Gypsyism, and that this advisor needs to work together with other advisors on the Länder level. So that was a very quick walkthrough, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. I don't hear you.
Yes, no. Many thanks for your presentation, especially for stressing that the Commission and the Central Council as well consider that anti-Gypsyism is not an issue of the minority of Sinti and Roma, but it's an issue of the majority society. And also for stressing the connection between past and present, more than connection, how injustice takes still place, how victims of the genocide, of the Nazi persecution are experiencing justice nowadays. This is really, it shows really the historical dimension in its connection with the present. I will give very shortly the floor to Lina for a technical explanation.
Yes, we were so excited to jump in the experiences of German Commission that we forgot to tell you how to interact with this. So should any of attendees have questions, we are very much welcoming you to post them immediately, even after you just heard Marcus' presentation, in Q&A session that we will be able to take up after all the panelists and discussants have spoken. So please be active with your questions, and today really we want to make it as interactive as possible. And secondly, we also are on Twitter, and also we count on the help of Helena Vako, CHACHIPEN intern, to promote this discussion on Twitter. So welcome to use hashtag no anti-Gypsyism or handle CHACHIPEN EU to join this discussion. And furthermore on, we are very happy that today we have also partners from our CHACHIPEN project, other organizations such as Ergo and FAGIC and Asociacja Fast Forward. So that's a little interlude before going for another speaker. So Guillermo, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Lina. Now we go to Silas Kropf. I give you the floor. I don't need any introduction more.
Thank you, Guillermo. I will rather take a look from a community point of view, so maybe stress some other aspects of the Commission and its work. Unlawful special registrations of Sinti and Roma by the police in Berlin, lockdown of entire apartment blocks in the context of COVID-19, plans to dismantle the memorial for the Sinti and Roma of Europe murdered under National Socialism, as well as deportations of Roma in existential emergencies who have been living in Germany for decades. The arrest of an 11-year-old child in handcuffs and other cases of excessive police violence. Statements by prominent people from the entertainment industry insisting on the racist foreign appellation in an ignorant, hurtful, and scornful manner. And the right-wing terrorist attack in Hanau on February 19th, 2020, the horrific climax in a series of racist attacks on Roma and Sinti. These examples alone, which accompanied the Commission's work, point to the presence of anti-Gypsyism in Germany. They also show the urgency of examining it closely as a specific form of racism in order to develop strategies for overcoming it. In this regard, the report of the Independent Commission on Anti-Gypsyism, as the first of its kind, can serve as a role model, providing empirical information without relying on a quantitative collection of ethnical data. I would like to recall the three central findings that are fundamental for the report. 1, only the recognition of the historical depths of anti-Gypsyism makes it possible to understand it in its far-reaching consequences. 2, the effects of the failure to recognize the genocide and to effectively delegitimize after 1945 are evident everywhere. In the form of a reversal of guilt, the causes of the crimes were ascribed to the victims. 3, the experiences of Sinti and Roma are almost invisible in public discourse. The lack of empirical studies on the actual extent and the presence of the various self-organizations of Sinti and Roma neglects their role as central actors for social change. Little was known about their importance, their number, their strategies and agendas, as well as the general conditions of their engagement. Despite its important empirical findings, this report can only be the beginning. In the future, it will be important to consider anti-Gypsyism in all relevant social fields, in political decision-making processes, in scientific practice, in media representation, in historical political educational work, and last but not least, in institutional action. This is the only way to achieve a sustainable change of perspective called for by the Commission. The report shall not only address political stakeholders, but also serve NGOs as a tool to strengthen the political importance of their work. With the before-mentioned triad, change of perspective, catching up justice, and participation, the report actually highlights the overall aims of the civil society engagement of the Sinti and Roma. Contrary to public perception, there is a diverse landscape of Roma and Sinti self-organizations representing the heterogeneous communities in Germany. They do irreplaceable civil society work. However, their work has hardly received any social appreciation. Furthermore, their right to participation has not been adequately realized. This applies to public areas, such as the media, but also the context of science, as well as the area of authorities and other state institutions. Binding and long-term political participation structures are rare. Though, the basis of political participation is a civil society that can exercise this right of participation. This requires specific resources, such as financial security, a certain degree of professionalism, or simply time. Minority positions, in particular, also need social recognition and a strong lobby. Meanwhile, the majority of organizations work under conditions of insecure structures. This affects both the funding and the social structures. Paternalism is often still to be found in the funding landscape, as well as insufficient protection, for example, against right-wing extremist and racist attacks. To establish and enforce political participation of the communities in society, solid and sustainable conditions are mandatory. This also requires participation and equality in the relevant democratic bodies. Only those who have a voice will be heard. From this arises the claim to the report to be that kind of a voice that points out the situation and addresses politics directly. The Independent Commission on Anti-Gypsyism has drawn up their central recommendations on the basis of the scientific expertise of the Commission members, the results of the studies commissioned, as well as the consultation discussions and the hearing. The Independent Commission on Anti-Gypsyism therefore calls on creating effective and sustainable participation structures for the Sinti and Roma communities at all levels. This includes representation and voting rights for Sinti and Roma organizations in all state bodies that deal with the affairs of the Sinti and Roma communities, or in which anti-Gypsyism must be counteracted. In addition, the civil society work of the organizations of Sinti and Roma in Germany is to be strengthened through transparent structures and permanent financial support. Participation models, such as state treaties and/or participation councils and similar measures, should be implemented in cooperation with the communities at federal and state level and anchored in law. Another recommendation, Markus mentioned it before, targets the recognition of Roma refugees as a group particularly worthy of protection and the termination of their deportations. Combined with the claim for a comprehensive recognition of the genocide, these recommendations reflect the long-lasting claims from Sinti and Roma NGOs. According to the guideline, Nothing About Us Without Us, the implementation of reliable and sustainable measures requires Sinti and Roma representatives to be involved in the relevant processes. The content of this report can build a basis for NGOs to substantiate their claims. In terms of policymaking, it can serve as a guideline for taking dedicated actions to overcome anti-Gypsyism. This is the first time in history that we have such a comprehensive document available, which gives an overview of anti-Gypsyism, racist structures, and their consequences. In this regard, we must not neglect that it was not possible to evaluate all aspects in detail, but by addressing various public areas and levels, different authorities and stakeholders can evaluate their internal processes. Actually, I'm pretty convinced that there are many experts from the community of the Sinti and Roma who would be pleased to provide their support in counseling authorities regarding possible changes. But let me be clear, the report alone does not have the power to initiate change. With the submission of the report, the Commission's activities ended. But in fact, the work which has to be done only starts with the results of this report. It now depends largely on the will of policymakers, and to be successful, the findings of the report must be taken seriously. The NGOs must also see the report for what it is, a tool that must be used with perseverance to point out ongoing anti-Gypsyism. As long as the requirements of such a report or the regulations of a European framework do not have the force of law, ongoing persuasion and awareness raising remain required. Especially in the context of the formation of a new government in Germany, it must be ensured that the report does not literally disappear in a drawer. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Silas, especially for pointing out that the Commission stresses the fact that the experiences of Sinti and Roma are made invisible by the dominant means of media and politics, and stressing as well that the community is heterogeneous. In being like this, different instruments have to be developed to address the needs of the diverse groups within the communities. And also you're right, the big challenge now for politicians, for the governments, and also for the civil societies is to push for the implementation of the recommendations and to push for real change. Many thanks, Silas. Now I will give the floor to Marcela, so that in order to you can comment on the inputs of our speakers. Marcela, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for a great pioneering work and presentations on the issue of anti-Gypsyism. I am aware that the topic of anti-Gypsyism is much more advanced in Germany and Sweden compared to the other member states, thanks to the pressure of the civil society, which is, of course, very important to influence and shape such initiatives at the national level. I also understand that project CHACHIPEN, which is about learning from truth and reconciliation processes, experiences from Sweden and Germany, wants to inspire other member states to start similar processes. And of course, the Commission welcomes such truth and reconciliation commissions, truth and reconciliation processes at the national level. While we do not have competencies to enforce such measures in the member states, we fully support them at the national level, for example, through the newly adopted EU Roma strategic framework for equality, inclusion and participation that was adopted by the Commission last year in October, or through the Citizenship, Equality, Rights and Values program to promote truth and reconciliation at the national level. And I believe also that project CHACHIPEN was also funded through this very important program. And indeed, anti-Gypsyism is a specific form of racism, which is deeply rooted and also accepted in the society. And if we do not understand its manifestations, we will never be able to achieve justice for Sinti and Roma in the EU. Anti-Gypsyism is a root cause, long-standing phenomena or challenge that really perpetuates the exclusion of many Roma and Sinti and significantly hinders the chances to enjoy rights and access to services on equal footing with the others. And you stated correctly, it's not It's not a Roma problem, it's not a Roma issue. This is the issue that we have in the society. I want to mention also the results of the last Eurobarometer from 2019 on discrimination in the EU, which shows that 61% of Europeans believe that discrimination on the grounds of being Roma is widespread in their country. Only 66% of general population in the EU would feel comfortable having a Roma as a colleague, and only 49% would feel comfortable about having a Roma person elected in the highest political positions. Therefore, racism and discrimination against Roma is the most pervasive, widespread, and unfortunately very often unpunished form of racism and discrimination against Roma across Europe. And yes, the topic of anti-Gypsyism is one of the main topics in the EU Roma strategic framework, as I mentioned before. And this framework is a policy document which determines the policy work concerning Roma for the next 10 years. The importance to fight against anti-Gypsyism was put at the same level with socioeconomic inclusion, because obviously, if we want to speak about Roma equality, inclusion, and participation, we also need to speak about the root causes of exclusion and poverty, which is racism and discrimination against Roma. The commitment to fight against anti-Roma discrimination and anti-Gypsyism has been further reinforced by Council recommendation, which was anonymously adopted by all member states this year on 12th of March. And in this document, member states committed to consolidate their efforts to adopt and implement measures to combat discrimination, anti-Gypsyism, and social and economic exclusion, as well as their root causes. And in this document, for example, countries committed to adopt and implement measures to effectively fight direct and indirect discrimination, including by tackling harassment, anti-Gypsyism, stereotyping, anti-Roma rhetoric, hate speech, hate crime, violence against Roma. For example, measures to analyze and acknowledge the existence of anti-Gypsyism, which is very important, and raise awareness of those phenomena through the media, school curricula, and by other means, and also among civil servants, for example, police, social workers, and other important stakeholders that come across or they work with Roma directly. This document also speaks about measures to promote multicultural awareness-raising activities and campaigns in schools, measures to promote awareness of Roma cultures, history, language, including the memory of the Roma Holocaust and reconciliation processes in society, inter alia through action providing relevant training for teachers and designing appropriate school curricula, and so on. It also speaks about the measures to foster positive narratives about Roma role models. And of course, I have no space to list all of these measures, but what is important is that there is a commitment from the member states to fight against anti-Gypsyism. The new national Roma strategic frameworks have been developed by the member states. And these strategic frameworks from the member states are expected to include to fight against anti-Gypsyism as a standalone priority, but also as a cross-cutting priority in all sectoral policies, including to establish quantitative national baselines and targets concerning this issue to be able to measure progress. This week's in our unit, we have been receiving the national Roma strategies from the member states, as well as integrated policy frameworks. As you know that not all member states have got specific Roma strategies. And we will be assessing the strategies throughout 2022, and the communication on the assessment of the strategies will be published sometimes in autumn 2022. So yeah, that's me for now, and thank you very much.
Many thanks, Marcela, for giving us the perspective of the Commission, European Commission, and we welcome very much the Commission. European Commission recognizes the anti-Gypsyism as the main cause for social exclusion and poverty faced by parts of Sinti and Roma communities throughout Europe. We wish the same commitment from member states, what is not always the case, as we know. But we continue in this fight. Many thanks, Marcela. Now I will give the floor to Anna, who will give us the perspective from the Roma civil society at European level. The floor is yours, Anna.
Thank you, Guillermo. Thank you, the panelists, and for your presentations, and to Marcela for the perspective of the Commission. I come from Ergo Network, the organization which is the network of civil society organizations, and we also stand behind the Alliance Against Anti-Gypsyism. We believe that the success of any Roma-related policy depends on everyone's commitment to fight anti-Gypsyism and racial discrimination at the root cause for social inclusion and the poverty of Roma. We find ourselves now in quite strange times. On one hand, we can see the growing anti-Gypsyism, not only in EU member states, but also in the enlargement countries. The COVID-19 pandemic, for example, it has a disproportionate impact on the Roma, Sinti, and traveler community. Silas gave us some examples of other modern cases of discrimination. But then on the other hand, we must also admit that we have walked a long way of lobbying and pushing for the issue of anti-Gypsyism to be heard and accepted by the institutions. This is probably what Marcus referred as a change in perspective, and I really like this formulation. There is an increasing recognition for the fact that Romani people are not the cause of this ideology. And I'm really happy to hear Marcela mentioning that specifically. A lot is achieved when it comes to policy design, but Romani people still do not feel this in their lives. Many Roma across Europe still struggle to survive and face hostility and discrimination and racist violence. What we seem to miss at policy level is fighting the systemic anti-Gypsyism. The data we have so far usually talks about individual cases of anti-Gypsyism. We struggle to look at it structurally. I also think that the process of truth and reconciliation, historical justice, as Marcus called it as well, is an essential part of combating anti-Gypsyism, also on the structural level. You have mentioned how the families now are still affected by the events of the past. I myself come from Lithuania, the country where almost 1/3 of the Roma were killed during the Holocaust. And this is not the event of the past. This is the event which is still alive in the minds of grandchildren and even great-grandchildren who are living now. And things like Holocaust, slavery, coercive sterilization of Roma women, these events produce severe trauma, which passes from generation to generation. And that is why we see the initiatives like CHACHIPEN, and especially the progress made in Germany and Sweden, as necessary part to fight against anti-Gypsyism. When we speak about truth and reconciliation, I must agree with Marcus, this is a process, more a process than a mechanism, such as setting up a commission. And as Ergo Network, we see the local level as the most important one. We see mobilization of local people as our co-work. Fighting anti-Gypsyism should be embraced and implemented at grassroots level by and with Roma activists, NGOs, and communities. CHACHIPEN project is an excellent example of focusing on building coalitions of Roma NGOs and experts. And this coalition can support policy recommendations and processes of truth and reconciliation. They can also learn from the experience of Sweden and Germany and further build on those. But this is not enough. More needs to be done in all the countries across Europe to create a common awakening, language, and commitment to support demands for restorative justice. Not only that, we also demand the teaching of Roma language and history in schools and promotion of Romani culture and identity. Focusing on spreading and sharing the good examples, capacitating Roma grassroots organizations and building alliances among Roma organizations, but also connecting them with other groups suffering from racism and historical justice. So not just separating ourselves from the rest. These are the key in creating meaningful processes in all countries across Europe. The Holocaust wouldn't have worked without the conspiracy, both tacit and active support from many of our societies. And the same way, the social justice cannot be achieved unless all of us contribute to dismantling the societal chains of prejudice and injustices that have been built up until today. I thank you.
Many thanks, Anna, especially for your final words, stressing that injustice was committed by large parts of the society, European societies, and we need as well to change this situation, these framework conditions nowadays, unfortunately, as well. And also for stressing the issue of the local level, because I was also discussing with colleagues in the framework of the Fundamental Rights Agency meeting this week, we're discussing the need to conduct consultations with policymakers as well at local levels, because a huge amount of policies, of measures fighting anti-Gypsyism or fighting social exclusion of disadvantaged Sinti and Roma are taking place at the local level. Many thanks, Anna. I'm checking now if we have questions from the audience.
Yes, we have some interactions going on
okay.
already that discussants or panelists only can follow, but we would like to bring it to a bit forward. So Stefan Müller has asked few questions towards the German Anti-Gypsyism Commission colleagues. Basically, he's asking, many Roma from Western Balkans fled to Germany, but were either returned or to be returned? And what are the recommendations of the Commission with regard to fighting anti-Gypsyism in countries of origin, like in the Western Balkans, in addition to promote that they can stay in Germany as refugees? So, and his second question is how much model of the Anti-Gypsyism Commission of Germany would serve as a model for the countries in the Western Balkans too, in particular with regard to Truth and Reconciliation Commission CHACHIPEN foresees and is addressing consequences of the conflicts in Western Balkans. So I would like to give that back to Marcus and Silas. Also maybe adding the question that we received from Marina Tsikos from FRA, she's also asking about information on how many Romani women and LGBTQ people were involved and what was their representation in the process while working on this report. So yeah, we can start with Marcus.
I wanted to answer mainly to Stefan's second point and would combine this with Gwen's question. For me personally, I think that the commissions are not the perfect tool to be transported to other countries, because it's, in my perspective, it's too easy to just ignore the results for the politicians. Of course, we produce important data, important report that also the civil society can use. But from my perspective, if the if the commissions were really like reconciliation or truth commissions that are community-led, that have sufficient funding to organize this process on a federal level as well as on a regional and local level, and coordinate such research processes that would at the same time produce knowledge about the discrimination as well as knowledge about concrete recompensation needs, as well as empower the local organizations to be better engaged with each other. I think this would be results that would be much more difficult to ignore. So from my personal perspective, the danger that, for example, I don't know, if whatever country would set up such a commission, they can either ignore it or they could, I mean, as I said, I think we were just lucky that the commission was formed of people where I consider that were critical to anti-Gypsyism, but it's totally possible to put people on such a commission if you don't want critical results that just produce a report that, yes, there is some media images that are not very well, but more or less the anti-discrimination laws are in place and we don't have a real problem. So I don't really think that those expert commissions are the way forward, because I'm much more in support of those truth commissions that are really community-led and that really put those processes on a much deeper level. And this, I think, is also in part an answer to Gwen's question, because this would also answer this question of, yes, it is a normal thing. It happened in every city, in every region. It took different forms, but this process, the truth process, by itself, it claims we need such an all-encompassing process because it is a normal thing and not just something that happened here and there, but it happened everywhere. It happens everywhere. It is a structural thing. So in a way, expert commission can still allow this to be seen as something unnormal, something irregular. If you say we need a truth commission because the problem is everywhere in the country, you tell by itself this is a problem that is normal, that is accepted in the country, and we need to tackle this.
So maybe I will just get to the point of Marina with a question regarding Roma women and LGBTQ people. So as Markus mentioned, we were 11 people, 11 so-called experts in this commission, and 3 of them were part of the community. And if you take a look at those 3 people, among those 3, we have 2 Roma women and 1 LGBTQ person. So actually, it's not that bad in terms of the commission members themselves. And then on a larger scale, as we had this underrepresentation of Roma in the commission, it actually was quite important for us to also live this nothing about us without us. That's why, for example, had this non-public hearing of active Roma NGOs in Germany, which Markus also mentioned. I also mentioned it before. And one of the big studies that we commissioned during our work focused on, Markus also mentioned that before, on the empowerment work of the Roma and Sinti NGOs. And what they did during this study is that they actually tried to find all NGOs that are active in Germany. So it was not only that we invited the NGOs that we knew to the hearing, it was actually all NGOs that we could find in Germany. And among those, among these NGOs, there were at least a few feminist organizations, 1 explicit LGBTQ organization, and 1 intersectional organization. And all the input that we received from those organizations, so their analyses, their concepts, their experiences, their ideas, all that was actually taken in consideration when we wrote the recommendations and the corresponding part of the report.
I would like to complement this question, Silas. I wanted to ask you if a second commission, Antigypsyism, would be set up. Would you do something different to involve the communities? Or you would repeat the same procedure?
Actually, no, I would not repeat it one by one, of course, because it is actually that point that the Commission itself raised very early, that it is really sad that you have a Commission where only, or not even a little more than a third of the people in the Commission are part of the minorities. So this is definitely a point that we could work on. And actually, the circumstances that we have with the pandemic, in addition, that's something that we didn't even mention before. So we were in this pandemic, no more possibilities to do any offline events. So this hearing with more than 70 organizations took place online, with organizations that never worked online before. So it was actually also some kind of logistic challenge to get this done, as well for the consultation discussions that we had with different umbrella organizations in Germany. So what has to be done if a second, and I hope that there will be a second commission to be installed, we would preferentially have more experts from the communities involved. And then also, depending on the schedule that we had like this 2-year schedule, which were not even 2 entire years, even a little less. And we had to deliver at the end of this period. So we were just not able to take the time we wanted to have more participation events, more structures which allow to give input to our work, which also had, at least at the beginning, some kind of small negative impact on the communities, because they actually knew there is a commission, they are working on anti-Gypsyism, and we get no information, we have no idea what they do, what their results are, what they're here for. And this was one of the main reasons why it was so important for us to have this kind of safe space where we organized this non-public hearing, from one side, just to show our faces, of course, to show some first results of our work, but also to give some kind of insights that we are under such a pressure. So I have given the examples of the events that have occurred during we did the work of the commission. So we had these that at least asked for some reaction from our part. We had political stakeholders that got back to us with some inquiries where we said, sorry, we're not here for that. We're not responsible for some ad hoc consultation for any policymakers. So that is why it was really difficult to focus on our topics, and also why we say that there must be a second commission, because just in this period of time that we had, it was just not possible to cover anti-Gypsyism in all its dimensions, in all details. So there is still a lot to do for a second commission, of course.
And I would like to raise or to read out this question that Marcus referred. Gwendoline Albert from Czech Republic is asking that she noticed that the understanding of anti-Gypsyism as a specific kind of racism is yet to be fully grasped because of the core belief that Czech society is somehow immune to racism, and that it happens as a social illness elsewhere, but it doesn't apply to Romani people. Yeah, there is a rejection, normalization of this anti-racism as mainstream position. And she asks how you are planning to advocate to implement these recommendations and how this should be leveraged for international discussion with Czech decision makers. And here I also would like plug in this conversation Marcela and Anna from their respective advocacy perspectives, especially since she is reminding us that Czech Republic will have its EU presidency in the second half of the next year. So maybe you are foreseeing some potential ways how this anti-racism discussion could be raised, or what are your entry points when speaking with these decision makers? And then, of course, we'd like to hear some insights from Marcus and Silas. Marcela, yes?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. And yes, of course, we are aware that the about the upcoming Czech presidency next year, and we are planning some things that we hope for Czech presidency will be up for, but at the moment, you know, it's still in the stage of discussion, and I cannot really reveal any information because nothing was confirmed. But what I can say is the Czech Republic adopted the strategy for Roma equality, inclusion, and participation. I think it was in May this year, where the topic of anti-Gypsyism, or I think in the Czech way it's Antigypsyism, is one of the priorities. At the moment, you know, I cannot really say to what level this area is or this topic is focused on the mainstream society, but I can imagine that, you know, if you want to work on anti-Gypsyism, you have to work with the mainstream society. But yeah, as I said, like, we still don't have the assessment of the national strategies, and it is something what will only happen next year. And yeah, the communication on the assessment of all national strategies will be published only in autumn in 2022.
Thank you. And let's turn to Anna.
Yes, thank you for the question. And with sadness, I think Czech Republic is far from being alone in this position. So we have many countries like this, including my own country, but many member countries. And of course, this is something to work on. So, as I said, that we have come a long way to achieve some kind of change in perspective, and we still have a very long way to go. And through our mechanisms, through our member organizations on the ground in different countries, we will of course continue lobbying, and through Alliance Against Antigypsyism. So using all our mechanisms to work on that. But yes, the problem is there, and we are aware of that, and it's not limited, unfortunately, to one country, but we find it in many countries.
And may I can ask also, like, since we are speaking about this, and CHACHIPEN project is also related to this topic, and I don't know, did you have any, you know, thoughts about trying, you know, to maybe convince member states, like, for example, Czech Republic, you know, to learn from this process? Or are you focused only on I think it's two countries, Spain and Romania, or what is the situation?
Well, yes. So we take it by country. So we have the strong alliances in Romania and Spain. So this will be the countries with the strongest focus now. But of course, the idea is to replicate this practice or adapt this practice, because the situation will be different in different countries. But yeah, to spread it across Europe, and not only touching EU member states, but also not forgetting about the enlargement countries and other countries we have in ERGO.
Thank you for this question, and this actually nicely relates, I think, to second Marina's question about concrete actions which the Commission will take in near future, and I mean concrete actions that we can learn from in CHACHIPEN project also, and maybe just building a bit the links with the experiences in Czech Republic, because we know that in Czech Republic there was this process to address forced sterilizations for Romani women, and it ended up with concrete reparations. So is there anything like that, concrete remedies or reparations being called or suggested by the Commission also within this frame of Antigypsyism Commission in Germany?
I mean,
okay,
there was concrete recommendation for this compensation of discrimination in the compensation process for National Socialist persecution. So that was very like concrete recommendations. But it's really, I mean, you have to understand that officially the commission is over. We have commissioned our report, and that's it from a government perspective. So I don't think we never really had much political power, and whatever power we had is kind of over at the moment. So I really think we shall keep this in mind. And this is what I try to answer, or what I try to reply to Gwen's question. We are in a constant political fight, and most political figures in most nation states, in my perspective, they don't take up the fight against anti-Gypsyism because they think it's something necessary to do, but they take it up to get political gains by it. So for this German situation, it means that the government can present this report in a European process and say, look, we did this great report, we did this commission, we are leading in the fight against anti-Gypsyism. And for us, the task was to write the report so critical to the German government that they won't be that proud of the report. But it has to be in this balance all the time. So we have to take care that our work is not something that can be used to negate the aims that we have. But this is a constant danger. If they understand that with that report or with that measure, the work has been done, and they can tell this to others, to other pressure groups, then such a process might even be counter-effective. So this is why I'm so skeptical about those processes, and that we really have to take care that the outcome is in the end beneficial and is really critical of racism and does not serve to shut down the critique of racism.
Marcos and Sila, I want to get again to this point you are mentioning, Marcus, because I understand your point. You are preventing from the danger of normalization. You know, that means that one state builds up a memorial or sets up a commission, and then this state can say, okay, we're doing the most, the best for Sinti and Roma in our country. You know? But this is, but at the same time, this is quite tricky, because it's a kind of recognition through the state to the victims. No? It's a kind, maybe a very small step forward. No? I agree with you, but I'm trying as well to see the added value we can have from such kind of processes. The issues, the question as to you and to Silas is to how can we learn, or can other European countries or civil society organizations, Sinti and Roma organizations from other countries learn from this process, and how might be implemented or transposed there, and under which conditions? First Marcos and then Silas, maybe.
Guillermo, adding just again this question from Marina Tsikos for Silas about concrete actions in the future, like also if you would like to add something. And then I would like to come back to other questions posed by participants.
Mm-hmm.
Marcos, I think it was up to you first.
I think you can go, Silas.
Yeah, it was the Marina question is up for you.
Okay, so I go for it. Yeah, actually, it's the same answer that I have to give as Marcus did before. The Commission will take no more actions because the Commission doesn't exist any longer. So therefore, it has no possibilities to conduct any action. And this is really a sad thing because, for example, Marcus and me, as well as our other colleagues that are still promoting the report and taking part in discussions and so on, we do that because we want to push it on our own, but not because we have like this official mandate to represent the Commission anymore, because the Commission doesn't exist any longer. So that's unfortunately the only answer that I can give to stay with the question. I'm sorry.
And Guillermo's question for Marcus?
I think Guillermo's question is also a bit the question Roma Active Albania posed, right? What would we recommend?
Mm-hmm.
And I think from my perspective, the most important thing is this: it is something normal. This is, I mean, this is not a recommendation, but rather a thought. But this is the thought I try to push, and I think a lot of other people try to push on a European level for years now, that it's not something that's happening at some point to some people, but it is something that shapes society, that is deeply enrooted in majority societies. So I think to push this thought, this perspective, is something that I would say is what I recommend first. And maybe for me personally, what I didn't reflect on as much as needed in the last years is how much of an institutional aspect this is. My work focused on media representation, on stereotypes, on the things that are in the minds or in the ideology, right? The stereotypes, the pictures that they have. But even if you erase such pictures and such stereotypes, if the structures are like they are, and the structures are historically built, the institutional racism will continue. So I think we need to focus much more on those institutional aspects of the racism, be it in, I mean, in the fields that are defined by the European Commission, but the focus is that there shouldn't be discrimination in healthcare, there shouldn't be discrimination in housing. But I think until now, it's not so much shaped in a way that this is considered institutional racism in a way of how is this reproduced? How does it work? How does the police racial profiling work? How does the social work approach work? So this is something I think would be needed as a second perspective. And the third is, I mean, the most important thing, again, don't let this process be something that helps talking down the racism and helps giving a fig leaf, but let this process be a process where you as an organization, as civil society, have the means to be critical and to continue to be critical.
Thank you so much, Marcus, for this insights. I think it again nicely transitions into another question on institutional racism and racial profiling raised by Orhan Tahir, and he refers to EU Commission's large-scale funding projects on prevention of radicalization and extremism in some Balkan countries like Bulgaria and EU member states like Bulgaria. And these projects increase anti-Gypsyism, especially among the police officers, because the Roma is the main target group of such projects, and project is based on some very slim and pseudo-scientific basis. So he's asking, do participants, and here I would like to address question firstly to Marcela and Anna, and do participants know about these projects and how what significant risks of securitization it poses, and what to do in order to address them, and how to prevent this also happening at EU level. If Marcela and Anna would like to step in, and then maybe we'll come back to Roma Active Albania question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lina, for the question. I think this question has been raised by this participant also at previous meetings, very similar meetings, and but we can only say that there is a way how to report such projects or such initiative, and without reporting, without any factual information, without giving us any hints, there's nothing we can do. So I would recommend the participants, to report it. There is a system how to do it. I can share it with you, and maybe you can then forward it to Mr. Tahir, or Mr. Tahir can also approach me personally through my work email, which I'm happy to share, and I will let him know how to complain about such initiatives or projects.
And I know Ergo has been involved somehow in this question also, so Anna?
Well, yes, this is the question which the same thing which we answer from different points all the time. I think it's very important to see anti-Gypsyism as a structural problem, what was already mentioned. So not to view it as individual cases, but to see it as a structural institutional program, and to address it, like to go through the root, but not just scratch the surface. And another thing, like extremely important thing, would be, of course, the involvement of the community, involvement of Roma people, not only in the implementation of those projects, but involvement in drafting the projects. So involving from the beginning to setting up them from the beginning into the mechanism.
Thank you so much, and I think we can do a bit of roundup on the question for you all, which already I think Marcus started to answer. And Roma Albania is thanking for concise and excellent presentations, and is asking, according to you, what are 3 most important things to be taken up by institutions and by organizations in the fight against anti-Gypsyism? And maybe here still adding up this question also, not only in the EU, but also in Western Balkans and partner countries. So what would be your key 3 takeaways? We heard from Marcus about participation, about investigation of these issues. Would Silas like to start it off?
Still, I'm not an expert for the Western Balkans, but I can also try my 3 steps to fight anti-Gypsyism. And if one day we find those 3 steps that really lead to the perfect result, then we'll be really living in a happy place. But let's keep that besides. So I think that the first thing that is actually crucial is still the recognition of the fact that anti-Gypsyism exists, and that only because I think, or that I say that I might be anti-racist or not racist, that this is not a guarantee for me not to have some kind of racist behavior or racist speech. This is really the first step that they have to take. I have been in touch with a lot of institutions where people say, yeah, of course we are fighting anti-Gypsyism, we would love to promote projects and so on, but try to tell them that some of their texts that they publish on their website or criteria that they have for their projects actually reproduce anti-Gypsyism. Then they actually don't like talking to you any longer. So this would be the first step for all kinds of institutions. And then the second part will also be about dialogue. we have a lot of, and I think it's the same case for all the different countries, a lot of experts in the different communities who work for years on those fields, who examine anti-Gypsyism, who have ideas how to overcome it. And this is some kind of resource that all the different countries possess, but that nobody uses or only uses to really small extent. So this could be a second thing, really to involve the communities and give them the possibility to bring in their ideas and their concepts. And the third, I think the third thing will be that we have to get to some kind of circle of ongoing reflection. In a lot of cases, there are specific measures that are taken or one single action that is taken. And after they're done, it's over, no more anti-Gypsyism, we are all happy, we can go home. But there's really a lack of reflection and ongoing processes of questioning themselves. And this is a little bit the fear that that always comes to me regarding these reports, as for example our report, because actually the moment when our report was published or given to the government was actually a very bad moment, because it was the end of an election period, and currently we have a new government being formed. So the commission was the thing of the old government, and the new government has now to do something with it, which raises actually the risk for them to actually not doing anything, as it's not their thing. So it's also a lot about timing. And this combining the reflection and timing, we get to the point that it is really important to have a strong community which communicates with each other to make sure that they tackle the institutions at the right moment, to make sure that institutions are rather pushed to do what they should do. And let me just close with this, that in my opinion, it's still very sad that we still have to push institutions. And I don't think that I will see it in my life, but I'm really looking forward to the day when they start working on their own without being pushed.
Thank you so much. And with this, we can turn to institutions. Marcela.
I think mostly most of this the points I'm going to say were already raised, but from my personal perspective, what's very important also from the experience, the recognition, which was already mentioned, the recognition that anti-Gypsyism is here. It's here for centuries, and this recognition has to come from the governmental institutions. So it's not that only civil society is going to speak about the existence of anti-Gypsyism. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not that just the civil society, will speak about the anti-Gypsyism as the issue we have in society, but it also has to be acknowledged by the government, by the governmental institutions. Secondly, it is also important that we as a society, we have to understand, and this was already mentioned, that this is not a Roma problem. This is not a Roma issue, because this is usually what we refer to when speaking about this topic. This is a problem that we have in this society. And as Marcus was also mentioning, this is a problem that is shaping our society. And thirdly, what I consider as important to address anti-Gypsyism is implementation of effective measures to address it, of course, with the participation of Roma and Roma civil society, with the participation of, of the Commission, such was established in Germany, but also, the most importantly, participation of Roma people themselves.
Thank you so much, Marcela. Now I will turn to Anna before coming to Marcus, and I see we left out one very important question. Anna, what are 3 key things or steps that you think should happen?
Yeah, I'm afraid I will not say much more new things here, which were not said yet. So I would say that, first of all, we should recognize that anti-Gypsyism exists, but recognizing it, we should have in mind that it's not only single cases of police violence, single cases of hate speech. It's something which is deeply embedded in the structure of institutions very often, and in the whole society. So I think this is very important to have in mind. So not to see it as individual cases. And then the second one, of course, is mobilizing the Roma community and the civil society, and to have the involvement of Roma, not only in the implementation, but in the creation of the project mechanisms. And the final one, I would say, is to realize that anti-Gypsyism is a form of racism. And meaning that we can build bridges with other groups who are suffering from racism and historical injustices. We can learn from each other, and we can build alliances and coalitions so broader than we are doing it now.
Thank you so much, Anna. And the question was for Markus from Doris Peske, who was asking about the discussions that they were happening in Germany about the state treaty with Sinti and Roma in Germany, and whether the process has been defined or will be defined with new government. I see answer from Markus, but maybe you would like just to reiterate quickly, and before adding your 3 key steps, if any, to complement, to address anti-Gypsyism.
No. I raised the hand because I wanted to put this on a more specific level regarding what the report is treated with, but I can't add anything to the answer I gave. We recommended such a treaty, but we are not in any way informed or included in the process. The 3 steps I already gave, when we were talking about institutional racism and about how it is accepted that anti-Gypsyism exists and how this report is considered, I wanted to give an example. There's a small chapter on police racism. It's only a subchapter of institutional racism. And in the conclusion, it says that, and I try to translate quickly, after the National Socialism, the perpetrators continued to shape the perspectives on Sinti and Roma in Germany. So we're talking about 50s and 60s. And then it says, until now, there is little sign that this perspective is fundamentally changed, has fundamentally changed until today in police practices and in approaches to police work. So, I mean, there's a government report, and on the outside, it says Minister of Interior, and the report says National Socialist perspectives more or less prevail in police work in Germany until today, to put it a bit more, to put it a bit more drastic, right? And you would think that, I don't know, police would approach the commission, would ask, okay, you found this, how can we change that? You would think that ministers of interior would approach the commission. You would think that there's some outcry in the media that this happens, but nothing happens. It's just, it's written there and that's it. I'm not even sure if most organizations of Romani and Sinti did recognize this. I didn't see any press releases. So this is what I mean with the change in perspective. If you commission such a report, you have to also read it and you also have to deal with it. And if this doesn't happen, then the whole process is flawed, because you just produce the paper, but you're not willing to act upon it. So that's what I want to tell with, we have to be behind it and we have to change the perspective. And if such a report states that police still uses more or less the perspectives of National Socialism, surveillance of Sinti and Roma in Germany, then we expected that there's some reaction to this, that there's something that follows this. That's what I asked for. And I could take any other example. I just took this example because I know it well, but we could make the same case for schools, for health, for whatever part of society.
Thank you, Marcus. And I think this really relates to what Anna mentioned about this coalition building and partnership building, and the timing that Silas referred to, because the case in Czech Republic on Stanislav, the man killed by police, the outcry happened because of timing and because of these mobilizations around very similar cases with racial profiling happening in US. And this shows a bit of this power of transnational mobilization processes and tapping into certain narratives. So that not only the works of the Commission, but timings and also strong alliances are very important. And with this, I would give also for Guillermo to say some final words, and then we'll have to close the webinar. Unmute.
Yes, thanks a lot, Lina. No, I wanted to take the final words of Marcus. What is needed is that implementation of recommendation. What is the hugest, the more difficult challenge in this whole process? But the issue is which role civil society organizations we are going to play in this process, and to be careful that this such kind of commissions of reports are not a kind of window dressing, no, just for the audience, just for public relations, trying to show that the states, in this case Germany, are doing the best for the communities, what is not always the case. Unfortunately, it's not the case. And no, I want just to stress again that the need to continue working and building coalitions and alliances among civil society organizations, and to address all kinds of anti-Gypsyism, and especially not to forget the historical dimension of the problem of anti-Gypsyism we have in the society. Just I wanted to conclude saying this.
Thank you. And of course, bringing institutions along and asking them to honestly reflect the issues. So with this, I think we are very much edging to the end. I see maybe very little remark from Marcela. Or
oh, maybe yes. Okay.
Okay. I saw you unmuting yourself.
No, it's fine. Maybe yeah, I can say something. To conclude. Yes, our work towards equality, inclusion, and participation of Roma, as well as our fight against anti-Gypsyism, is a long-term commitment, which of course require cooperation, alliances of all EU institutions, national governments, and equality bodies, human rights institutions, to team up and take action in partnership with civil society and full involvement of Roma themselves. We do rely on know-how of Roma and pro-Roma civil society. We do rely on know-how of academia. So please keep up your good work, because it provides a legitimate foundation for the formulation of the policies, both at national and European levels. And I also would like to ask, if you can share it with us, the report, even if it's in German. Yeah, it's fine. Or if you have a shorter version, please share it with us.
Maybe we can ask Marcus or Silas to share with attendees and panelists the link. And we would like just to thank you all for today's participation. Especially we would like to thank Guillermo and Central Council of German Sinti and Roma for leading this webinar and coming up with this idea. And I think it's really important for Ergo Network for their ongoing support and cooperation within a CHACHIPEN project, as well as CHACHIPEN partners who have been engaged in the process and in trying to explore how various transitional justice-like tools or similar commissions could work, and what sort of added value could be. So we definitely will be looking within the context of CHACHIPEN project in what's next, what's the added value, and the questions we raised today, and how such reports or commissions, under what conditions they should not become a fig leaves if civil society could come up with some decision, some recipes or mobilizations around them. And also we would like to once again to thank SEP's colleagues who have been cooperating very much and helping in setting up this webinar. So thank you so much for Miriam Mir and Xavier Hadidi for their kind support and cooperation, for Helena for her help with the tweets, and follow us at Twitter, CHACHIPEN EU. Also engage us with hashtag #NoAntigypsyism, and we are very much looking forward for your ideas, cooperation, and do not hesitate to contact ourselves, SEPS, Central Council, or Ergo, should you have any ideas for the future cooperation or some urgent examples and cases of institutional and ongoing anti-Gypsyism that you would like to bring forward, because I think CHACHIPEN provides this space.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
It has been getting darker and darker around us, so a bit, symbolically, but let's hope, there is still a glimpse of light, and CHACHIPEN maybe could help to a bit ignite it. So thank you once again for our excellent panelists, Marcus and Silas and Marcela and Dana. It has been great pleasure having you all here. And yeah, with this, on this good note, and of course our attendees for excellent questions. And with this note, I guess we depart on our weekend plans. So thank you a lot.
Thanks a lot. Bye.